So I didn't realise there was going to be a handheld microphone, so I have a little bit of problem with my notes. No. I may sit down if it gets too troublesome, and then I've got two hands. Yes, I'm on the executive committee of an organisation called Jewish Voice for Labour, and I'm also very actively involved with the Jewish Bloc, which participates in the marches. I should say a word about Jewish Voice for Labour. That word labour is there in a heritage sense. It doesn't describe ongoing support. The trouble is we have quite a reasonable reputation on the left, and we have lots of members, so it takes time for the name to catch up with the reality. Anyhow, I'm here really speaking for the Jewish Bloc. If you were reading The Guardian, for example, you would possibly not realise that there are many Jews, not just a few, who are outraged about what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank. You'd never spot that, or probably not. Victims of a genocide perpetrating another one. It's extraordinary, and there are Jews who feel that and call it out. But you wouldn't know that very easily from The Guardian. If you were listening to the BBC, still less. Did you hear that? Sorry, I turned over two pages at once. That's the trouble with having one hand. Okay. You never hear a Jewish voice speaking for Palestine. You hear plenty of Jewish voices speaking for Israel. Do the police listen to the BBC? Yes. I suspect they do. Perhaps they don't read The Guardian, so maybe they're not disadvantaged by that. But they certainly listen to their master's voice, or perhaps I should say their mistress's voice, since we have Yvette as the Home Secretary. It's quite clear that there was a switch in police tactics on the 18th, or in the run-up to the demonstration on the 18th of January, which should have been a march, but turned into a demonstration. In the run-up to it, there were unprecedented levels of public pressure from the chief rabbi, from the board of deputies of British Jews, and of course from the press back, as usual, calling out hate marches, generating hysteria. Just to point out, the chief rabbi is not elected by the Jewish population. The board of deputies is not elected by the Jewish population. There are arcane processes by which they emerge, but they in no sense are being chosen by Jewish people in Britain to speak for them. So the scare that was developed was there was a synagogue called the Central Synagogue, which was not too far from the BBC, where the march was scheduled, and had already been agreed to start from by the police. The rabbi of the synagogue said that some of his, you would call them parishioners, I'm not sure what the Jewish equivalent of parishioners is, some of the congregation were worried about, possibly too scared to come to the synagogue because of all these people coming to the hate march or on the hate march who would possibly assault them. God knows what might happen. So all of that is going on. The fact of the matter is the Central Synagogue is not round the corner from the BBC. You have to go around quite a lot of corners to get there. What's more, it's not even on the route of the march, and indeed the march starting from the BBC would have gone away from the synagogue, not towards it. So the synagogue was a pretext, and the worshippers were a pretext. So the organisers, as Chris will know only too well, offered to just do the march in the opposite direction. We wanted to protest about the bias of the BBC, so we'll start at the other end of the march, come back to the BBC at the end, have our speeches there, and it would arrive there at 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon, and it wouldn't disturb the service, and the worshippers would have all gone home. The fact that that was not accepted makes it quite clear that the worshippers were a pretext for the decision. They were not the reason for it. For those of you who may not have been to a Saturday morning service in a synagogue, let me tell you, I spent some of the worst hours of my life there on Saturday morning. My parents were wise enough not to go, but they insisted that I should go to be properly socialised. So every Saturday morning, I would spend 3 hours of complete boredom perhaps not being infused with the religious spirit myself. The services are very, very long, and a lot of praying and so on goes on. But it's always over by lunchtime. 3 hours is enough. So there was no way a service would be going on at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. But the police wouldn't budge. It was never about protecting worshippers. It was always about protecting Israel. I go back to the Jewish Bloc. Why do we exist? The Jewish Bloc was called into being by Israel's developing genocide. We met each other in numbers on the early marches in probably late October, early November of the year before last. We met each other there, and we knew, some of us knew each other, some of us were in groups together, others were in other groups. And by the second time we'd met each other, we thought, well, there's a lot of us, perhaps we should do it together. And eventually we did that, and we got a really rather splendid banner, and we could march behind it. It was all organised, still is organised by email and WhatsApp. There is no committee, there is no decision-making process. What happens emerges by osmosis, I suppose. But we managed to agree always where we're going to meet and what time we're going to meet, and we agree who the speaker will be that will speak on the platform at the meeting. And it's a vestigial organisation. I hope it might grow into something a bit stronger, because there are too many left or radical Jewish groups, and if we were a little bit more united, we'd have a better voice. But since that time, we've marched in our hundreds and occasionally into our thousands in every march that's happened. There is in this country a real and pernicious anti-Semitism. There always has been for hundreds, if not probably thousands of years, at least 1,000 years. Just there doesn't happen to be on the march. Whatever people make, I'm not sure saying everyone on the march is absolutely wonderful in that respect, but certainly there are no expressions of anti-Semitism. Indeed, what there are expressions are fulsome welcome and pleasure at seeing our Jewish comrades who are participating fully in the protest. The police, not so welcoming. They quite fail to understand that the Jewish community is not just one thing. There's more than one kind of Jew. It is actually racist to say that everybody who has a particular label is the same as all of the others. The lack of police understanding was quite striking on one of the earlier marches, where we were marching along in the whole suite. And suddenly we found that when the march came to a stop for some reason, that we were being cattled. The Jewish Bloc was surrounded by police, sort of shoulder to shoulder. It took quite a long time to explain to them that we were actually part of the march. we weren't a Jewish group that was about to make trouble and attack the marchers. On January the 18th, something less dramatic happened, but we were there in Whitehall, waiting for things to develop. And when things began to get critical in the event, which ended up with Chris's arrest, I believe, but we're not talking about that, we suddenly found there was a line of police shoulder to shoulder in front of the Jewish Bloc banner, which is, there was about 8 of us holding it in line, and there was about 16 police right in front of us. I mean, they appeared from nowhere. They'd obviously had instructions, and then our officer who was behind, after about 10 minutes or so, received another instruction, and somebody else to the side. So we were being managed according to some police agenda, not free assembly and free speech and all of that. Now, we did actually follow behind towards the event where the event happened. We weren't there when they occurred, but the police were presumably in some way manipulating the situation as to who would be where at what time. I'm one of a group of Jewish Bloc representatives that have since before January 18th been asking to meet with senior officers at the Met to discuss how we can improve their understanding of the Jewish community in this country and other things. And it's been quite difficult. They have said yes in principle, but in practice it hasn't happened yet. So we're hoping that we will be talking about some of this stuff sometime soon. That there isn't one unified Jewish community. We are always diverse, and now we're probably split, and some of the splits will probably not repair. Many people who are Jewish in this country are probably increasingly uncomfortable about what Israel is doing, even though they haven't come out against it. Some are being pushed further and towards outright anti-Zionism, anti-Zionism being not another word for anti-Semitism. It's about saying that the project proves to have been misbegotten, a late act of colonialism, when the age of colonialism, settler colonialism, ought to have been dead. So, you'll find us still in the Jewish Bloc on the marches. We'll continue to march until marches, we hope, are no longer necessary. Thank you.